He kissed his lover at the bar, thinking I saw nothing. I smirked just as his eyes finally met mine. But if he had paid attention, really paid attention, he would have seen that my smirk wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even hurt. It was the quiet, dangerous expression of a woman who has stopped begging for the bare minimum. The kind of smirk that comes after months of pretending everything is fine while your partner slowly becomes a stranger. He thought he was shattering me in that moment. He had no idea he was freeing me. The bar was warm, loud, golden. You know, the kind of place where the lights are dim enough to hide sins but bright enough to flaunt them. I had come with 2 coworkers to celebrate a project launch. I didn't even know he would be there. Maybe fate wanted to stop whispering and start screaming. Maybe the universe was tired of watching me make excuses for him. Maybe I had needed a clean, sharp cut instead of the dull bleed of daily disappointment. Whatever the reason, everything collided in that one moment. Him, her, the kiss, me. I saw him before he saw me. His back was to me, his shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't been in months. I used to believe that meant he was tired, stressed, drained. But now, watching him lean into this other woman, I realized something painful and simple. He was only tired with me. With her, he was alive. With her, he laughed, really laughed. And it sounded like a sound he had stolen from our early years. It felt like watching someone else wear a version of him I used to know. She was younger. Maybe by 4 or 5 years, she had that airy confidence women have when they believe the man beside them has chosen them fully and proudly. She leaned into him like he was her victory. She touched him like he belonged to her. And worst of all, he let her. He let her touch him in the ways he used to claim only I could. His hand rested on the small of her back, with a familiarity that made my breath catch. It wasn't clumsy or hesitant. It was practiced. The part that hurt wasn't the kiss itself. It was the ease of it, the effortlessness, as if this wasn't the first time. As if this wasn't a mistake, it was a routine. When he finally kissed her, it was slow, intentional, the kind of kiss that men only give when they want a woman to feel claimed. My heart didn't shatter. Instead, it felt like a glass window finally cracking open after years of pressure. The truth came in like cold air, and as it settled in my chest, I found myself unexpectedly steady. My smirk came like instinct, maybe because I knew he expected me to crumble, maybe because I knew I wouldn't, maybe because the pain had already lived in me long enough that this moment wasn't an explosion, it was closure. He didn't see me at first. He was too focused on her, too busy being everything he refused to be with me. But eventually, as fate would have it, he shifted slightly, and his gaze lifted just enough to catch sight of my reflection in the mirrored shelves behind the bar. He froze. His lips parted against hers, his eyes widened, his hand jerked away from her waist, and then slowly, almost fearfully, he turned. Our eyes locked across the crowded room, and something like terror flickered in his face. Not guilt, terror. Because he knew what that smirk meant. He knew me well enough to know that I only smiled like that when I was done pretending. Done waiting, done hoping. He knew in that exact moment that he hadn't just been caught in betrayal. He had lost me. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I held his gaze with a calmness so cold it made him flinch. His lover turned her head slightly, confused by his sudden shift, but he barely looked at her. His world had narrowed to the woman he expected to crumble, and instead found standing tall and unbroken. I turned and walked out before he could push through the crowd to reach me. I didn't need to hear his excuses. I didn't need the rehearsed apologies he had used months earlier when things started slipping. I didn't need explanations for disrespect that had already spoken louder than any words ever could. Outside, the night was crisp, smelling faintly of rain and city lights. People laughed as they passed, living lives untouched by my heartbreak. I stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the cold air settle into my lungs like medicine. I didn't cry. My heart was tired of crying for someone who didn't show up for me. Going home felt surreal. I sat in my living room, in the darkness, listening to the silence that had replaced our conversations long ago. I thought about all those nights he was working late, all the arguments that ended in him shutting down while I begged for honesty, all the times he kissed me with lips that felt distracted, distant, dishonest. The door finally opened around midnight. He came in slowly, like he was entering a courtroom instead of a home. His shoulders were slumped, his face drained of color. He whispered my name like a question, like a prayer. But prayers don't work when the believers stop believing. He stepped closer, but I held up a hand to stop him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break down. I simply told him what I had been too scared to say for months. I saw enough. And I'm not angry anymore. I'm done. The word done cracked something inside him. His face twisted, eyes widening in panic. He began stuttering excuses, hurried lies, promises he didn't know how to keep. He said she meant nothing. He said he didn't know what he was thinking. He said everything except the truth, that he had stopped choosing me long before I stopped choosing him. He cried. I didn't. He slept on the couch that night, but I didn't sleep at all. Not from heartbreak, but from clarity. At sunrise, I packed a small bag. He followed me from room to room, choking on apologies, begging for a second chance. He grabbed my wrist gently, not forcefully, but desperately. I pulled away, not out of anger, but out of self-respect I had neglected for too long. I told him I needed time, space, distance, not to fix us, but to find myself again. I walked out the door with the same smirk I had at the bar, not because I was proud of what happened, but because I finally understood something powerful. He didn't betray me at the bar. He betrayed me long before that. The bar was simply the moment I stopped betraying myself. And that was the true beginning of everything that would follow. He thought he was chasing the same woman who had once cried over every unanswered text and every cold night beside him. He didn't realize the woman walking away that morning, bag in hand, heart steady, was someone new. Someone reborn from the ashes of disappointment. Someone he no longer knew how to control, guilt, or confuse. The hook is this. When a man finally realizes he lost the woman who once waited for him, he panics. But when the woman realizes she found herself, she never goes back. And that was the energy burning in me as Chapter 2 unfolded. The days after I walked out were strangely quiet, like the world had paused just long enough for me to breathe for the first time. I stayed at my friend Mira's apartment, sleeping on her couch, wrapped in unfamiliar blankets that somehow felt safer than the bed I shared with him. Mira didn't ask questions at first. She simply handed me a cup of tea and said, "Stay as long as you need." Those 6 words were more comfort than everything he had given me in the last year. On the second morning, my phone began to vibrate nonstop. At first it was calls, then texts, then voice messages. His tone shifted with each attempt. The first few were firm, "We need to talk." Then panicked, "Please answer." Then hollow, "I can't sleep." I didn't reply. I wasn't trying to punish him. I simply refused to be pulled back into a cycle I'd barely escaped. By the 3rd day, silence replaced desperation, but not for long. That evening, as I stepped out of Mira's building to run a quick errand, I saw him leaning against his car. He looked worn out in a way that went deeper than his tired eyes. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled. He pushed off the car slowly, like he thought any sudden movement would scare me away. "I just want 5 minutes," he said softly. That's all. 5 minutes wasn't long, but it felt heavy with the weight of our history. I followed him to the small park across the street. We sat on opposite ends of a bench, a long, cold space stretching between us. He started talking immediately, messy, tangled words spilling out of him like he had rehearsed a speech but forgot the lines halfway through. He said he ended things with a woman from the bar, that it meant nothing, that he was confused, going through something, feeling lost. I stared at him quietly, letting him talk. He kept waiting for me to cry, to interrupt, to crumble, but I didn't. When he finished, there was a long stretch of silence. Then I asked the one question that burst the bubble of excuses holding his story together. "Did you need me when you kissed her?" It was a simple question, but the way he flinched told me everything. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I stood up slowly. His eyes followed me with a kind of desperation I had never seen in him, not even during our worst fights. But I didn't sit back down. I didn't tell him we could fix things. I didn't tell him I still loved him, even though some part of me still did. Instead, I walked away. Back inside the apartment, Mira looked at me carefully, searching my face for cracks. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm learning to be," I answered, and for the first time I meant it. The next week passed quietly. I went to work. I began journaling, pouring every tangled thought into paper. I cooked meals with Mira and found myself laughing again. Not forced laughter, but the soft, genuine kind that slips out without permission. Every day I woke up feeling a little lighter, as if shedding invisible weights one by one. Then came the message. Not from him, from someone else, a woman I didn't know. Her name popped up on my screen late at night. Hi! You don't know me, but I think you should see this. Attached were screenshots. Dozens, messages between him and other women. Some recent, some months old. Some while he had claimed he was fixing things with me. It wasn't just one affair. It was a pattern, a lifestyle, a choice. But I didn't collapse. My hands didn't even shake. Instead, I felt something inside me click into place like the final piece of a puzzle. I blocked him on everything. Not because I hated him. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I finally understood I deserved better than half love and full betrayal. Weeks passed. I found myself smiling again under sunlight that felt gentler now. I reconnected with old friends who told me they felt like they had gotten me back. I went for walks after work, listening to music I used to love but had stopped playing because it reminded me of happier times. Slowly, the music became mine again, untainted by memory. One evening, I dropped by a cozy cafe on my way home. While waiting for my order, I caught my reflection in the glass panel beside me. I stared at the woman looking back, her eyes clearer, her posture straighter, her smile softer but more real. I almost didn't recognize her. In the best way. Life has a funny way of bringing closure when you least expect it. 2 weeks later, I ran into him outside a bookstore. I hadn't planned it. He hadn't either. For a heartbeat, we both froze. This time, he looked even smaller than before, like guilt and regret had carved pieces out of him. He stepped toward me slowly, carefully. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice was fragile. I nodded, not out of hope, but out of maturity. I had healed enough to handle his presence without drowning in memories. He apologized. Not with dramatic speeches or promises he couldn't keep, but with simple, painful honesty. His voice shook when he admitted he'd lost himself, hurt me deeply, and didn't expect forgiveness. He just wanted to say he was sorry, and I believed him. But it didn't change my decision. "I forgive you," I said quietly. His eyes filled with tears. "But we can't go back." He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I felt the past loosen its grip on both of us in that exact moment. We parted ways with no bitterness, no yelling, no blame. Just two people who once loved each other, but learned that love without loyalty isn't love. It's illusion. A few months later, I walked into the same bar where everything had shattered. But this time I wasn't breaking, I was glowing. I laughed with friends, sipped my drink, and looked around the room with a peace I had earned through fire. The bartender asked, "Ever been here before?" I smiled and said, "Yeah." It taught me a lot. As I walked out into the night, the cool air wrapped around me gently. I realized something powerful. The woman who had smirked at the bar wasn't hurt. She was awakening. And the woman walking away now? She was unstoppable.